What if your entire existence was a lie written in the stars by someone who never wanted you to know the truth? In the grim darkness of the far future, there are warriors who stride across burning worlds as walking gods. The Adeptus Astartes, Space Marines. Humanity's finest defenders, forged from the genetic legacy of 20 demigods who once walked alongside the Emperor himself. Each chapter traces its bloodline back to one of these Primarchs, a sacred genealogy written in their very DNA. It's a heritage they wear with pride, carved into their armor, sung in their battle hymns, immortalized in 10,000 years of glory. But some chapters wake to a different reality. They search through archives that lead nowhere. They recite founding legends that don't quite make sense. They examine their own gene seed and find ... questions, dangerous questions. The kind that, in the Imperium of man, can lead to excommunication, censure, or worse. Their origins aren't just forgotten. They're erased, hidden, buried beneath layers of deliberate silence that reeks of conspiracy. The question isn't why they don't know where they came from. The question is, what truth is so terrible that even speaking it aloud could doom them? Picture the librarium of the Blood Ravens chapter. Vaulted chambers of crimson stone, where thousands of ancient texts line walls that stretch into shadow. Brother librarians move between towering shelves, their psychic hoods crackling with suppressed power, their eyes scanning for answers that always slip away. The Blood Ravens are knowledge seekers, obsessed with understanding, with collecting, with knowing. They hoard relics from across the galaxy with an almost pathological need. Yet the greatest mystery in their possession isn't locked in their vaults. It's written in their blood. They don't know which Primarch fathered them. Official records state they descend from Rogaldorn's lineage, but the evidence doesn't match. Their gene seed shows signs of psychic potency far beyond what the Imperial fists possess. Their thirst for ancient knowledge mirrors another legion entirely, one whose name is spoken only in whispers, if at all. The Thousand Sons, traitors, heretics who sided with chaos during the Horus Heresy. But that's impossible, isn't it? The Thousand Sons fell into damnation. The idea that loyalist chapters could spring from traitor stock is unthinkable, heretical, unless someone, somewhere, decided that gene seed was too valuable to waste. Unless someone made a choice that history could never be allowed to remember. The Blood Ravens themselves suspect. In their most guarded moments, their librarians feel it, a psychic weight in their DNA that speaks of sorcerous origins. But suspicion isn't proof. And in the Imperium, proof of tainted heritage means execution. So they search endlessly through their archives, through battlefields and dead worlds, hoping to find evidence of a different truth, a safer truth, knowing all the while that they might be running from themselves. They're not alone in this purgatory of doubt. The Silver Skulls operate from the shrine world of Varsavia, their fortress monastery, a place of portents and prophecy. Their prognosticators read the Emperor's tarot before every battle, divining the future in cards that glow with an otherworldly light. They claim descent from Ultramar, from the genetic perfection of Robut Gilliman, but even a casual examination reveals inconsistencies. Their records fade into deliberate obscurity after their founding in the 38th millennium. Their methods, their obsession with divination, their approach to warfare, none of it matches the Ultramarines' rational, tactical doctrine. They're missing something. And whatever it is, someone decided it should stay missing. Then there are the Minotaurs. And the Minotaurs are different. While other chapters with questionable origins seem troubled by their ignorance, the Minotaurs radiate an aura of grim certainty, as if they know exactly what they are and simply don't care what anyone thinks. They appear when the High Lords of Terra need a problem solved with maximum brutality. They deploy with equipment that other chapters wait centuries to receive. They fought other Space Marine chapters, shattered chapter homeworlds, executed Astartes who stood against the Imperium's highest authorities. They're attack dogs on a very short leash, and that leash is held by someone powerful. Their gene seed is a mystery wrapped in layers of classified information. Some whisper they're descended from the 13th Legion, but their savagery speaks of different origins. The World Eaters, perhaps. Angren's sons, bred for slaughter. But the World Eaters fell to corn during the Heresy. So where do the Minotaurs truly come from? And why does asking that question seem to invite disaster? The answer might lie not in genetics, but in purpose. The Minotaurs don't exist to defend humanity. They exist to enforce compliance. To be the hammer that falls when Space Marines themselves step out of line. They're a tool of control, and tools don't need a proud history. They need plausible deniability. Across the Imperium, dozens of other chapters exist in similar shadow. The Marines Malevolent, whose cruelty toward civilians and callous disregard for innocent life raises constant questions about their genetic stability. The Carcharodons, void prowlers who emerge from the darkness between stars, with equipment from an age that should no longer exist. Their skin pale as corpses, their eyes black as the abyss. The Relictors, who dared use chaos artifacts against chaos itself, and paid the price in censure and suspicion. Each of them carries a question mark where their heritage should be. Each of them operates under the weight of unspoken truths. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. The Imperium has detailed records of everything. The Administratum's archives span millions of worlds across thousands of years. They track tithes down to the last grain of wheat, document bloodlines across centuries, maintain genealogies of noble houses that would fill libraries. The idea that Space Marine chapter foundings, events of monumental significance involving the Emperor's own genetic legacy, could simply be lost or forgotten strains credibility. Records aren't missing because they were destroyed by time or war. Records are missing because someone, at the highest levels of imperial authority, chose to make them disappear. The Inquisition. The High Lords, perhaps even agents of the Emperor himself, working through channels so secret that their existence is theoretical. Which leads to the darkest possibility. What if some of these chapters know the truth about themselves? What if the Blood Raven's leadership understands full well that they're sons of Magnus the Red, but maintains the fiction to survive? What if the Minotaurs serve Terra's will precisely because their origins would doom them otherwise? What if loyalty to the Imperium is the price they pay for being allowed to exist at all? Ignorance might not be a curse. It might be a carefully maintained shield, a bargain struck in blood and silence. Serve without question, and we won't ask where you truly came from. Fight for humanity, and we won't speak the name of your traitor father. Be useful enough, and your past stays buried. But bargains like that have a way of coming due. And in the 41st millennium, as the galaxy tears itself apart and ancient truths claw their way back into the light, some secrets are becoming impossible to keep. The question remains, when these chapters finally learn the truth about themselves, what will they do with it? The answer came for the soul drinkers in blood and fire and betrayal. They were once proud sons of Rogel Dorn, or so they believed. They wore the crimson and bone colors of the Imperial Fist's lineage with honor, fought the Emperor's wars for millennia, bled on 1,000 worlds in his name. But something was wrong. Their gene seed mutations accelerated beyond normal parameters. Their battle brothers developed a horrifying thirst, a need to consume the biological essence of their enemies. Not for sustenance, for something deeper. Something that whispered in their genetic code. Then came the revelation that shattered them. Hidden records uncovered during a desperate investigation revealed the truth they'd never been meant to discover. They weren't descended from Dorn at all. Their gene seed carried markers of the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, but not the pure strain of Sanguinius legacy. Something altered, something experimental. The Mechanicus had tampered with their creation, spliced and modified their genetic heritage in ways that violated the most sacred prohibitions. They were an experiment, a prototype, a test to see if gene seed could be improved, enhanced, perfected beyond even the Emperor's original design. The Imperium's response was immediate and brutal. The soul drinkers were declared renegade. Not for any crime they'd committed, but for what they'd learned. Knowledge itself became their sin. They fought back, not against humanity, but against the machine of imperial authority that tried to erase them. They descended into a decades-long nightmare of running battles, questionable alliances, and moral compromises that pushed them closer and closer to the very damnation they'd spent their existence fighting against. Some fell to chaos. Others died still believing in the Emperor. In the end, their chapter was annihilated, their gene seed destroyed, their names stricken from imperial records. The message was clear. Discovering your true origins is a death sentence. But the soul drinker's fate only explains half the equation. It shows what happens when a chapter learns the wrong truth. What about the ones who learned it and survived? What about the ones who were meant to know from the beginning, who carry their terrible heritage as both burden and weapon? The Dark Angels know. They've known for 10,000 years. Stand in the depths of the rock, the Dark Angels' mobile fortress monastery, and you'll find chambers that exist on no official schematic. Descend through levels of security that would stop even other Dark Angels dead in their tracks. Past the interrogation chambers where the screams of the fallen echo through stone that remembers the destruction of Caliban itself. Go deeper still, past the Deathwing's inner sanctums, into places where only the Supreme Grand Master and his most trusted brothers ever tread. There, in darkness lit by flickering candles that have burned for millennia, you'll find the truth they guard with obsessive, fanatical devotion. Their Primarch, Leon L. Johnson, led half his legion into civil war against itself. The Dark Angels weren't just loyal during the Horus Heresy, they were fractured. Brother killed brother on their home world while their Primarch fought among the stars. When Caliban was destroyed, when the warp storms claimed their world, hundreds, perhaps thousands of their battle brothers were scattered across space and time, lost to the Imperium's currents. The fallen. Dark Angels who may have turned traitor, or may have remained loyal, or may have been caught in the confusion of a war where the lines between allegiance and betrayal blurred beyond recognition. The Dark Angels hunt them still. Every successor chapter descended from the Lion's gene seed, every one of them, participates in this endless secret war. They abandon imperial campaigns mid-battle if there's even a rumor of one of the fallen. They interrogate, torture, and execute their own ancient brothers, trying to understand what truly happened 10,000 years ago, trying to prove their loyalty, trying to ensure the Imperium never learns that the First Legion, the Emperor's prototype Space Marines, shattered themselves in internal conflict. They know their origins perfectly. That knowledge hasn't freed them. It's imprisoned them in a cycle of paranoia and obsession that defines every moment of their existence. So perhaps ignorance isn't the curse some chapters believe it to be. Perhaps it's a mercy. Consider the consequences of knowing. If the Blood Ravens were to receive absolute proof that they descend from Magnus the Red, what then? Magnus, who led his legion into damnation trying to save the Emperor, whose 1,000 sons became twisted sorcerers bound at Tzeentch, the chaos god of change and scheming. The evidence is already damning. The Blood Ravens' psychic potency, their obsession with knowledge, their practice of requisitioning relics that technically belong to other organizations, a polite way of saying theft. Even their name, Blood Ravens, echoes the crimson armor of their suspected progenitor. If that connection were proven, confirmed beyond any doubt, the Blood Ravens would face an impossible choice. Confess and be destroyed, their gene seed terminated, their chapter dissolved, their battle brothers scattered or executed. Or stay silent, become complicit in the cover-up, carry the weight of hidden heresy in their hearts while fighting the Emperor's wars. Neither option offers honor. Both guarantee suffering. The Imperium understands this calculus better than anyone. It's why some origins remain shrouded. Not because the truth is lost, but because the truth is managed, controlled, deployed or buried as strategic necessity demands. There's a theory whispered among those few inquisitors who dare think such thoughts. After the Horus Heresy, when half the legions turned traitor and the Imperium stood on the brink of extinction, a decision was made. The loyalist legions were shattered, broken into smaller chapters to prevent any one force from accumulating the power to threaten Terra again. But what about the gene seed from the traitor legions? Millions of doses of genetic material, refined and tested over the Great Crusade's 2 centuries, proven effective in creating superhuman warriors. Destroying it all seemed wasteful, heretical even in its way. That was the Emperor's own work, his genetic mastery made manifest. So perhaps someone made a choice. Perhaps the High Lords or the Mechanicus, or some cabal of both, decided that gene seed could be salvaged. Purified, they'd call it, redeemed. Traitor stock used to create loyalist chapters, with all records of the process sealed under the most severe classifications. New bloodlines for a shattered Imperium. Sons of fallen fathers, given a chance to prove that heritage isn't destiny. But how do you ensure such chapters remain loyal? How do you guarantee they won't follow their progenitors into damnation? You keep them in the dark. You give them false lineages, proud histories that tie them to loyal primarchs. You monitor them constantly, place inquisitorial watchdogs in their paths, engineer situations where their loyalty is tested again and again. And if they ever get too close to the truth, if they start asking the wrong questions or displaying the wrong traits, you eliminate them, quietly, completely. The soul drinker's fate becomes a warning written in blood. Do not seek what you weren't meant to find. It's brutal, pragmatic, utterly in keeping with how the Imperium operates. An empire that burns whole worlds to stop chaos corruption, that sacrifices thousands of psychers daily to maintain the Astronomicon, that measures human life in acceptable losses and necessary evils, wouldn't hesitate to build Space Marine chapters on lies if it meant survival. But lies have a way of becoming truth if you believe them long enough. The Silver Skulls may not know their true heritage, but they've forged an identity over millennia. The Blood Raven's obsession with knowledge, whatever its source, has made them some of the Imperium's most effective warriors against chaos cults. The Minotaurs' brutality, their willingness to do what other chapters consider dishonorable, makes them invaluable when civil order needs to be restored through overwhelming force. Maybe that was the point all along. Not to create perfect copies of the original legions, but to forge something new from broken pieces, to prove that choice matters more than blood. That loyalty can be taught, instilled, made real through action rather than genetics. Or maybe that's just what we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Maybe it's all damage control, spinning disaster into doctrine, calling conspiracy wisdom. The Carcharodons might know the truth. These pale, void-born hunters who emerge from the darkness beyond the Imperium's borders, like ghosts from a forgotten age. Their equipment dates back to the Great Crusade. Their tactics mirror those of the Raven Guard, but twisted, made more savage, refined by centuries of isolation. They speak in an ancient dialect, practice traditions no other chapter remembers. Some call them Tabero's Redwake, named for their massive chapter master. Others call them what they call themselves, the Space Sharks. Predators who patrol the galaxy's edge, doing the Imperium's work in places too distant for anyone to witness. Their exile might be punishment or protection, keeping them away from questions they might answer, keeping answers away from questions that might destroy them. They serve a sentence without knowing the crime, if crime it was. And they serve it perfectly, asking nothing, expecting nothing, existing in the cold dark between stars, where origins don't matter because survival is all that's left. As the 42nd millennium dawns, as the Great Rift tears reality itself in half and demons walk openly across human worlds, these questions matter more than ever. Primarchs are returning. Roboute Guilliman walks again, leading the Imperium through its darkest hour. Lion L. Johnson has awakened from 10,000 years of slumber. If more return, if Magnus or Lorgar or Perturabo manifest in the material universe, what happens to the chapters that might carry their gene seed? What happens when a traitor Primarch looks upon warriors who bear his genetic legacy, but wear the Imperium's colors? Would they feel rage at the theft? Pride at their son's loyalty? Or would they simply see weapons to be reclaimed, tools to be turned? The Blood Ravens deployed to Cyrene in the Carava system during the early years of the Indragan Crusades. Standard operation: investigate reports of heretical activity, purge the tainted, move on. But something happened there. Their librarians reported psychic phenomena, visions of a figure in crimson armor, speaking words in a language they somehow understood despite never having learned it. Brother Captain Gabriel Angelos ordered immediate withdrawal, sealed the mission records under the highest classification, and requested inquisitorial investigation. Whatever they found, whatever they experienced, it shook them. And the Inquisition, for once, let it lie. Sometimes, ignorance is the only thing keeping you alive. The reports from Cyrene were buried, but they couldn't bury what the Blood Ravens librarians felt in their souls. In the quiet moments between campaigns, when psychic wards were lowered and minds allowed to drift in meditation, some of them still heard it. A voice, paternal, ancient, touched with sorrow and terrible knowledge. It spoke of mistakes made in arrogance, of warnings unheeded, of powers that shouldn't have been touched. It spoke in the measured cadence of a teacher who'd watched his greatest students destroy themselves for refusing to listen. Brother Librarian Isidore Akis, before his fall to chaos, claimed he'd seen the figure clearly in his visions. A giant in crimson, one eye replaced by an orb of pure psychic energy, standing amid burning scrolls and broken libraries. The figure had looked at him with something that might have been recognition, might have been regret. Then the vision shattered, and Isidore was left gasping on the meditation chamber floor, blood leaking from his nose, the taste of forbidden knowledge burning on his tongue. He never spoke of it again, not openly. But in the years before his corruption, he'd thrown himself into increasingly desperate research, hunting through archives, interrogating prisoners, seeking some answer to a question he couldn't even properly articulate. What am I? Where do I truly come from? The quest consumed him, hollowed him out, made him vulnerable to the very powers he sought to understand. When chaos finally claimed him on Tartarus, when he turned his psychic might against his own brothers, was that corruption random, or was it inevitable? The sins of the father visited upon the son, genetics asserting themselves across 10,000 years. Gabriel Angelos killed him, put a bolt round through his former friend's skull, and watched the body crumple. In his private logs, recovered much later, Angelos wrote a single line that night: "If we are what I fear we are, then we are already damned. But we can choose how we face that damnation. Choice. It always comes back to choice." The Red Scorpions would argue there is no choice when it comes to genetic purity. Based on the desert world of Endymion's Lament, they've elevated the sanctity of their gene seed to a religious obsession. Every Battle Brother's genetic material is tested, retested, monitored constantly for any deviation from the prescribed template. Their apothecaries wield more power than their chaplains. A single mutation means death, gene seed harvested and destroyed, the brother's name stricken from the chapter's records as if he'd never existed. They claim descent from Gilliman's line, and their genetic testing appears to confirm it. Appears to. But their obsession itself raises questions. Chapters secure in their heritage don't spend this much time and energy proving their purity. The Red Scorpion's fanaticism feels less like pride and more like terror, as if they're running constant tests not to maintain purity, but to watch for something. Some genetic marker that might emerge despite all their precautions. Some hidden taint that would reveal their true origins as something other than what they claim. What are they so afraid of finding? In the deep vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars, in chambers where the blessed Omniseia's most sacred works are maintained, tech priests with the highest clearances tend to gene seed repositories that predate the Imperium's current age. Stasis fields hum with barely contained power, preserving genetic material in perfect suspension. There are samples here from all 20 legions, yes, all 20. Even the ones whose numbers are supposed to be expunged. The Ain and the 11th, the lost legions whose very existence was erased from history by the Emperor's own command. Even the traitor legions, samples recovered before the Heresy. pure strains untainted by chaos corruption. The tech priests log every sample, catalog every strain, maintain meticulous records of genetic drift across millennia. They know things the chapters themselves don't know. Things the Inquisition doesn't know, or pretends not to know. When a new founding is declared, when the High Lords authorize the creation of fresh chapters to bolster the Imperium's defenses, it's to these vaults that Magos biologists come, requisitioning gene seed samples according to specifications that are classified 7 levels beyond top secret. Sometimes they take samples from the loyalist stock. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they blend genetic material, creating chimeric strains that combine the strengths of multiple lineages while theoretically eliminating weaknesses. The science is sound. The theology is questionable. The morality is irrelevant. The Imperium needs Space Marines, and the Mechanicus provides them according to whatever criteria the High Lords deem necessary. But the tech priests keep their own records. Secondary logs that exist in data formats so ancient that only they can read them. And in those logs, in binary strings that sing the Omnissiah's praises, while encoding truths that would shatter chapters, they track the real parentage of every gene seed sample they've ever distributed. The red scorpion samples came from a blended stock, primarily Guilliman's line, yes, but with genetic markers from another source spliced in during the 26th founding. The secondary source is listed with a designation that translates to Stockpile Omega 7. Traitor gene seed, heavily modified, the 4th Legion origin, the Iron Warriors, Percherabo's sons, masters of siege warfare, brilliant strategists corrupted by bitterness and pride. Their genetic legacy, purified through extensive modification and blended with loyalist stock, flows through the red scorpion's veins, not enough to corrupt them, just enough to gift them with the same obsessive perfectionism, the same need for control, the same paranoid attention to detail that defined the 4th Legion before its fall. The red scorpions don't know. They'll never know, not if the Mechanicus has anything to say about it. But their behavior, their compulsions, their very character is shaped by genetic imperatives they don't understand and can't control. They are their father's sons, acting out patterns written in their DNA by a Primarch who fell to chaos 10,000 years ago. And their desperate testing, their fanatical purity protocols, they're performing them on themselves to make sure they never become what they already are. The tragedy is almost beautiful in its completeness. But here's where the story twists, where the conspiracy reveals itself as something more complex than simple deception. The blended gene seed wasn't a mistake. It wasn't corner-cutting or desperation. It was deliberate, calculated, the product of 10,000 years of accumulated data about which genetic traits produce which behavioral outcomes. The Mechanicus didn't just splice traitor and loyalist gene seed together randomly. They engineered specific combinations designed to produce specific types of chapters for specific strategic needs. The Imperium doesn't just need loyal Space Marines. It needs different kinds of loyalty, different approaches to warfare, different psychological profiles suited to different threats. Guilliman's rational genius, combined with Percherabo's obsessive perfectionism, creates chapters like the Red Scorpions, ideal for grinding siege warfare and defensive operations, where failure isn't acceptable. Magnus's psychic power, filtered through careful genetic controls, produces chapters like the Blood Ravens, perfect for anti-chaos operations, where understanding the enemy's sorcery is necessary. Kersey's capacity for terror tactics, properly managed and directed, could create chapters specialized in fighting enemies, where psychological warfare matters more than conventional force. The traitor Primarchs weren't just failures. They were prototypes, experiments that went wrong but still generated valuable data. And the Imperium, pragmatic to its core, decided that data was too valuable to waste, so they weaponized it, refined it, created new chapters carrying fragments of fallen fathers, shaped by genetic memories they don't consciously access but can't escape. It's not heresy if you don't call it heresy. It's not corruption if it serves the Emperor's will. It's not damnation if you're fighting against the very darkness your genes say you should embrace. The first Marine Malevolent who realized what they might be went mad. Not the dramatic madness of chaos corruption, but the quiet madness of cognitive dissonance that can't be resolved. His name was Brother Sergeant Malachor, and he'd been conducting unauthorized research into his chapter's history, trying to understand why they were shunned by other Space Marines, why their methods drew such revulsion even from fellow Astartes. He'd traced genetic samples, compared behavioral patterns, analyzed tactical doctrines. What he found in the gene seed structure, hidden in the complex protein chains that carry genetic information, were markers consistent with the 12th Legion, the World Eaters. Angren's butchers who'd embraced the butcher's nails and descended into mindless violence. The Marines Malevolent didn't have the nails, those horrific neural implants that turned men into rage-addicted killers, but they had something else. A genetic predisposition toward aggression that no amount of hypno-conditioning could fully suppress. A capacity for cruelty that emerged in their tactical decisions, their treatment of civilians, their willingness to sacrifice innocence for marginal strategic advantages. They weren't corrupted. They were designed this way. Forged from the genetic legacy of a broken Primarch, their cruelty was a feature, not a bug. Someone had decided the Imperium needed chapters willing to do the truly terrible things, the actions that even other Space Marines would balk at. Chapters without mercy, without the compassion that might make them hesitate when hard decisions needed making. Malachor stood in his personal quarters, holding the data slate with his findings, and felt his worldview crumble. Everything he'd believed about duty, about honor, about serving the Emperor, it all became suspect. If his cruelty was genetic, was it even a choice? If he'd been engineered to be brutal, could he claim credit for his service, or was he just acting out programming? Where did the man end and the gene seed begin? He walked to the chapter master's quarters that night. He requested an audience. He presented his findings. The chapter master listened in silence, then had him executed on the spot. The research was destroyed. The body was disposed of. Official records stated Brother Sergeant Malachor had died in a training accident. 2 weeks later, the chapter master requisitioned a meeting with an inquisitor of the Ordo Astartes, someone with the clearance and authority to confirm or deny Malachor's findings. The inquisitor arrived, reviewed the recovered fragments of data, and delivered a single message. Your gene seed is pure and untainted. Your lineage is secure. The Marines Malevolent are loyal servants of the Emperor, and any who suggest otherwise are falling victim to the corrupting whispers of chaos, seeking to undermine your faith through lies and doubt. This matter is closed. The chapter master thanked the inquisitor and returned to his duties. He never spoke of it again. But sometimes in the quiet moments before battle when he prayed to the Emperor for strength, he wondered what the truth actually was. Not the official truth, not the comfortable lie. The real truth, the one that explained why his chapter was the way it was, why they did the things they did, why other Space Marines looked at them with barely disguised disgust. He wondered if knowing would change anything. And in his darkest moments, he suspected it wouldn't, because the missions would still need completing. The enemies would still need killing. The Imperium would still need defenders willing to get blood on their hands, in ways that let others keep theirs clean. Someone had to be the monsters. Someone had to do the work that couldn't be spoken of in after-action reports. Maybe that's what these chapters really are. Not mistakes or conspiracies or hidden heresies, just tools. Weapons forged from questionable materials, because the alternative was having no weapons at all. The Imperium doesn't have the luxury of moral purity, it has survival. And survival requires using everything available, even the legacy of fallen angels and broken gods. The question that keeps surfacing, the one that haunts every chapter with uncertain origins, isn't whether they're loyal. Their actions prove their loyalty across millennia of service. The question is whether loyalty chosen in ignorance counts the same as loyalty chosen with full knowledge. Whether fighting for something you believe is true holds the same weight as fighting for something you know is a lie. Whether the Emperor, if he could speak, if he could pass judgment from his golden throne, would embrace these warriors as his sons, or reject them as abominations built from the ruins of his failure. And maybe, just maybe, the reason these origins stay hidden isn't to protect the chapters from the truth. Maybe it's to protect the Imperium from having to answer that question. The Emperor can't answer. He hasn't spoken in 10,000 years. His silence is the Imperium's greatest tragedy and its most convenient shield. Without his voice, everyone can claim to act in his name. Every atrocity becomes justified. Every compromise becomes necessary. Every lie becomes a form of faith. But there are those who sit closer to the throne than most, who walk the sacred halls where his withered form is maintained by the endless sacrifice of psychers and the machinery of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The custodian guard, his personal guardians, stand watch over mysteries that would break lesser minds. And they know things, not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that the Imperium their master built has become something he never intended. Something he might not recognize. Captain General Trajan Valores, leader of the Adeptus Custodes, stood in a chamber deep within the Imperial Palace, reviewing reports that few others would ever see. Intelligence from across the galaxy, threat assessments, genetic profiles of every Space Marine chapter in existence. The Custodes didn't just guard the Emperor. They monitored everything that might threaten him, and that included the superhuman warriors created from his own genetic work. The file before him concerned the Blood Ravens. Again, the Blood Ravens kept appearing in his reports, not because they'd done anything wrong, but because they kept doing things right in ways that raised questions. Their librarians were too powerful, too attuned to the warp's currents. Their battle tactics showed an understanding of chaos that exceeded what loyalist chapters should possess. Their obsession with recovering ancient knowledge had led them to artifacts that other chapters wouldn't have recognized as significant. They were either incredibly lucky, or they were operating on instincts bred into them by a father whose entire existence had been defined by the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Valores set the file aside and pulled up another. The Minotaurs, Terra's personal enforcers, deployed when even Space Marines needed to be brought to heel. Their brutality was legendary, their effectiveness undeniable. But their gene seed composition showed anomalies that the Mechanicus had flagged multiple times. Genetic markers that didn't quite match any known loyalist lineage. Aggression levels that exceeded safe parameters. A complete lack of the psychological safeguards that prevented other chapters from turning on their fellow Astartes. They were tools, blunt instruments. And tools broke eventually, especially tools forged from questionable materials. Another file, the Carcharodons, the void-born predators who operated beyond the Imperium's borders, in the darkness where only the most desperate or the most damned would venture. Their equipment dated from the Great Crusade. Their tactics mirrored those of the 19th Legion, but corrupted somehow, made more savage. They'd been in exile for so long that they'd become something other than standard Space Marines. Something older, more primal. The Custodes had theories about the Carcharodons, uncomfortable theories. What if they weren't descendants of a loyalist legion at all? What if they were survivors from one of the lost legions, the IIND or XITH, the ones the Emperor himself had ordered expunged from history? What if their exile wasn't punishment but protection, keeping them away from a truth that even the Emperor had deemed too dangerous to preserve? Valores closed that file quickly. Some thoughts were too dangerous to pursue, even for him. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. Across the Imperium, dozens of chapters existed in states of deliberate uncertainty. Their origins clouded, their gene seed questionable, their purpose carefully managed through a combination of misdirection and strategic ignorance. It wasn't accident. It was policy. A policy that had been in place since the second founding, maybe earlier. A policy that required constant maintenance, constant surveillance, constant intervention to prevent these chapters from learning truths that would destroy them. And Valores, sitting in his chamber reviewing files that chronicled 10,000 years of genetic manipulation and institutional lying, had to ask himself, was this what the Emperor wanted? Was this the Imperium he'd fought to create? An empire built on necessary evils and compromised principles, where even his greatest warriors were forged from deception? Or had they all lost their way so completely that they couldn't even recognize heresy when they were actively perpetuating it? The answer came 3 days later, not in the form of revelation, but in crisis. A distress signal from the shrine world of Malachor VII. The Blood Ravens had deployed there to investigate reports of Thousand Suns activity, a warband of Chaos Space Marines conducting some dark ritual in the planet's ancient catacombs. Standard operation. Purge the heretics, secure the relics, move on. But something had gone wrong. The message was fragmented, barely coherent, transmitted by a Blood Ravens librarian whose psychic scream carried across the warp like a wound torn in reality itself. Valores listened to it in the Caster's communication sanctum, his enhanced hearing picking out words through the static and anguish. That they knew us. Knew our names, spoke of our father. Magnus. Magnus the Red. Claiming we are his sons, the rubric Marines. They called us brothers. Emperor preserve us, they're not attacking. They're trying to recruit. The transmission cut off. Silence filled the chamber, heavy and suffocating. Valores felt something cold settle in his chest. This was the nightmare scenario. The moment when genetic truth and ideological loyalty collided with impossible force. The Thousand Suns, traitors for 10 millennia, looking at the Blood Ravens and seeing kin, offering brotherhood, offering answers, offering the one thing these warriors had sought their entire existence, knowledge of where they truly came from. What would they choose? Loyalty to the Imperium that had lied to them, or the terrible comfort of finally understanding their nature, even if that understanding came from the mouths of heretics? Valores activated his communication vox, cutting through layers of security protocols that would have taken anyone else hours to navigate. This is the Captain General. I need immediate contact with the High Lords. We have a Code Omega situation on Malachor VII. Code Omega, the designation reserved for threats that could destabilize entire Space Marine chapters. The kind of situation where a single wrong decision could turn loyalists into traitors, where revelation became weapon, where truth itself was the enemy. 20 minutes later, Valores stood before the Council of Terra's inner circle. Not the full assembly of High Lords, but the subset who actually knew what the Imperium was built on. The ones who'd inherited 10,000 years of terrible secrets and kept them because the alternative was collapse. He delivered his report with characteristic precision. The Blood Raven situation, the Thousand Suns gambit, the genetic implications, the risk of losing an entire chapter to ideological corruption, not through chaos taint, but through simple truth-telling. The Lord Commander Militant, speaking for the military establishment, wanted immediate intervention. Deploy the Minotaurs, quarantine the entire system, execute every Blood Raven who'd been exposed to the Thousand Suns claims, burn the evidence, maintain the lie. The Fabricator General's representative wanted caution. The Blood Raven's gene seed was valuable, their librarian some of the most effective anti-chaos operatives in the Imperium's arsenal. Destroying them was wasteful. Better to extract them, isolate them, conduct extensive screening and reprogramming. Save what could be saved. The inquisitorial representative, a woman whose face was hidden behind a death mask and whose real identity was known only to the Emperor himself, spoke last. The Blood Ravens have served loyally for thousands of years. Their actions prove their character. Their gene seed, wherever it originated, has produced warriors who fight against chaos with exceptional effectiveness. Perhaps because they understand their enemy better than most. Perhaps because they're fighting against their own nature with every battle. Does it matter? They are loyal. The question isn't whether to punish them for their genetics. The question is whether we can preserve that loyalty in the face of revelation. Silence. Everyone in the chamber understood what she was really saying. The system they'd built, the careful management of uncertain origins, it was breaking down. Not because the chapters were disloyal, but because the galaxy itself was changing. The Great Rift had torn reality in half. Primarchs were returning. Chaos forces were more active than they'd been since the Heresy. The lies that had held for 10 millennia were becoming impossible to maintain. Sooner or later, every chapter with questionable origins would face what the Blood Ravens were facing now. A moment where genetic truth and cultivated identity collided. Where they'd have to choose not just loyalty to the Imperium, but what kind of loyalty? The blind loyalty of ignorance, or the harder, more painful loyalty of knowledge? Serving a cause that had lied to them, because the cause itself still mattered. Because the enemies were real, even if the reasons for fighting had been built on deception. Valori's spoken to the silence. We need to make a decision, not just about the Blood Ravens, but about all of them. Every chapter whose origins we've obscured. Do we continue the policy of managed ignorance, or do we trust them with the truth? The Lord Commander scoffed. Trust? Space Marines with traitor gene seed? You'd give them proof of their tainted nature and expect them to remain loyal? I'd give them the choice, Valori said quietly. Because choice is the only thing that makes loyalty meaningful. Following orders because you don't know better isn't loyalty. It's just obedience. But choosing to serve the Imperium despite knowing it lied to you, despite knowing your genetic father was a traitor, despite carrying that burden with every breath you take. That's loyalty, that's faith. That's what the Emperor actually wanted from his Space Marines. The Inquisitor tilted her masked head. A compelling philosophy, Captain General. But philosophy doesn't win wars. Certainty wins wars. Belief wins wars. The moment we tell these chapters their true origins, we introduce doubt. Doubt kills soldiers before the enemy ever gets a chance. Lies kill loyalty, Valori's countered. Eventually. The Blood Ravens are facing that death right now. Every moment we delay, every second we let them twist in uncertainty while the Thousand Suns whisper truths we've denied them. We're proving that we never trusted them, never valued them as anything more than useful weapons. When this is over, assuming they survive, assuming they remain loyal, what will they be fighting for? An Imperium that sees them as tools? Or an Imperium that should have been honest from the beginning? The debate raged for hours. Proposals and counter-proposals, risk assessments and strategic calculations. Everything except the one question that actually mattered. What was the right thing to do? Finally, as the chronometers marked the approach of midnight, the Inquisitor raised her hand for silence. We vote. All in favor of maintaining current protocols, of extracting the Blood Ravens and suppressing all knowledge of the incident. 3 hands rose. All in favor of full disclosure? Revealing the truth about gene seed origins to affected chapters and allowing them to make informed choices about their continued service? 2 hands, including Valoris's own. The Inquisitor's hand stayed down. She spoke slowly, carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. I propose a third option. We go to Malachor VII personally, not with the Minotaurs, not with execution squads. We go with the truth, but we go with context. We tell the Blood Ravens everything, their origins, the genetic engineering, the policy of managed ignorance, all of it, and then we show them why. Show them the chapters that learned the truth and fell. Show them the soul drinkers. Show them what happens when revelation becomes corruption. Give them the knowledge, but also give them the tools to process it without breaking. She paused, letting the words settle. And then, we let them choose, but we make sure it's an informed choice. Not manipulation, not coercion, real autonomy. Because the Captain General is right about one thing. Loyalty without choice is worthless. But choice without context is just another form of manipulation. The chamber fell silent. Outside, across the sprawling vastness of the Imperial Palace, across Terra itself, across the million worlds of the Imperium. Space Marines fought and bled and died for an empire they believed in. An empire built on their sacrifice and sustained by their faith. On Malachor VII, the Blood Ravens stood in ancient catacombs face to face with their potential past, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell them what they were. The vote was called. The decision was made. And in 3 days, the Blood Ravens would learn the truth about themselves, delivered not by traitors offering corruption, but by the Imperium made serve their entire existence. Whether that truth would save them or destroy them remained to be seen. The Custodes strike cruiser broke through Malachor VII's atmosphere like a golden spear thrown by the Emperor's own hand. No fanfare, no declaration. Just arrival, sudden and absolute, carrying with it the weight of Terra's authority and 10,000 years of accumulated secrets. Captain General Valores stood at the prow, his oromite armor catching the light of the system's dying star. Beside him, the Inquisitor whose name was redacted from every database in the Imperium. Behind them, a full squad of custodian guard, each one worth 100 lesser warriors. They weren't coming to fight, they were coming to witness, to judge, to offer salvation or damnation, depending on how the next few hours unfolded. The Blood Raven's position had been triangulated to the ossuary of the fallen kings, a vast catacomb complex that stretched kilometers beneath Malachor's surface. Sensors showed 2 distinct signatures. Blood Raven's chapter forces, approximately 70 battle brothers, pinned in defensive positions. And the 1,000 Suns, a warband of unknown size, arrayed not in attack formation but in a perimeter. A circle, a cage made of sorcerers and rubric marines, holding the Blood Ravens in place not through violence, but through something far more insidious. Words, truth, the promise of answers. Valores moved through the catacombs like judgment incarnate. His guardian spear hummed with barely restrained power. The Custodes behind him moved in perfect synchronization, their presence filling the ancient corridors with an aura of such absolute authority that even the stones seemed to straighten in respect. They passed through areas where combat had clearly occurred. Scorched walls, spent bolter casings, the distinctive residue of psychic discharge. But the fighting had stopped hours ago. Now there was only conversation, negotiation, temptation. The central chamber opened before them, massive, vaulted, built by a civilization that had died before the Imperium was born, dedicated to gods whose names were carved in languages no one could read. Perfect acoustics. Every word spoken here would echo, would carry, would be impossible to ignore. The Blood Ravens stood in formation, bolters held at rest but ready. Their armor bore the signs of recent combat. Cracked ceramite, scorched paint, but they held discipline. They held the line. Even now, even drowning in the most dangerous knowledge the galaxy could offer, they maintained their formations, maintained their identity as Space Marines of the Imperium. Across from them, the 1,000 Suns, fewer in number but radiating power that made reality itself uncomfortable. Rubric Marines, their souls bound in armor by a spell cast 10,000 years ago, stood like ornate statues. Between them, true sorcerers moved with liquid grace, their armor crawling with arcane symbols, their eyes blazing with warp fire. And at their center, a figure in ornate crimson plate, his staff topped with a screaming demon skull, his presence pressing against the material world like a weight too heavy to bear. Sorcerer Lord Ahriman, chief librarian of the 1,000 Suns, the architect of the rubric that had turned his legion into dust and sorcery, one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. He turned as the Custodes entered. His expression, visible through his ornate helm, showed no surprise, only something that might have been sadness. "Captain General," he said, his voice resonating with harmonics that shouldn't exist in normal space. "I wondered if Terra would send you, or if they'd simply send the executioners." Valores didn't respond. He moved to stand between the two forces, his presence creating a neutral ground through sheer authority. The Inquisitor followed, her death mask reflecting nothing, revealing nothing. The Blood Ravens commander, Captain Gabriel Angelos, stepped forward. His face was haggard. Exhausted not from combat, but from hours of psychological warfare more brutal than any physical battle. Captain General, we request immediate extraction and debriefing. The enemy has been attempting to subvert our loyalty through false claims about our gene seed origins. False. Ahriman's voice carried no mockery, just question. Brother Captain, how can you claim they're false when you don't know the truth yourself? Silence, heretic. Angelos's words were sharp, but Valores heard the uncertainty beneath them. The crack in conviction that came from not being able to deny the claim with absolute confidence. Ahriman gestured to his warriors. They didn't advance. We've been here for 6 hours. 6 hours where we could have killed them, destroyed them, added their gene seed to our own twisted collections. But we didn't. Do you know why? No one answered. Because they're kin. Because when our psychic senses touch theirs, we feel the same patterns. The same genetic resonance. The same psychic architecture that defines the sons of Magnus the Red. They are our brothers. Lost brothers. Brothers who've been lied to since their creation. Brothers who deserve to know what they are. We know what we are, Angelos said, but his voice wavered. We are blood ravens. We serve the Emperor. We fight against chaos. And you do it magnificently. Ahriman's tone was gentle, almost fatherly. Better than we ever did. You've fought our corrupted kin with a dedication we could never match. You've resisted the very temptations that destroyed us. You are what we could have been if we'd made different choices. If Magnus had made different choices, doesn't that matter? Doesn't that prove that heritage isn't destiny? The Inquisitor spoke for the first time. Her voice was modulated, artificial, carrying no emotion. You're trying to corrupt them with truth. How very Tzeentchian of you. Ahriman turned to her. Corruption? I'm offering them answers, something the Imperium has denied them for millennia. They've served loyally, bled for your Emperor, died in his name, all while your administration hid their origins from them. Which of us is the real corrupter here? You serve the ruinous powers, and they serve an empire built on lies. At least my damnation was a choice. They weren't even given that courtesy. Valores raised his hand. Silence fell instantly, total and absolute. When a custodian commanded attention, even chaos sorcerers obeyed on instinct. He looked at Angelos, at the blood ravens standing behind him, their enhanced hearing catching every word of this exchange, their enhanced minds processing implications that would break normal humans. He saw their faces, saw the doubt, the hunger for answers, the fear of what those answers might be. Then he looked at Ahriman, at the 1,000 sons who'd traveled here not to kill but to recruit, to offer brotherhood to warriors who'd spent their existence fighting against everything Ahriman represented. You're both wrong, Valores said quietly. The Imperium did lie. The Blood Raven's origins were deliberately obscured. Their gene seed does carry markers consistent with the 1,000 Sons lineage, modified, heavily altered, but present. He heard the sharp intake of breath from behind him, heard the Blood Raven's ranks shifting, the tiny sounds of ceramite grinding against ceramite as enhanced physics tensed in shock. Angelo stood frozen. You're confirming it? I'm confirming that your genetic heritage traces to Magnus the Red. Yes, but heritage isn't identity, Captain. And identity is what we're here to discuss. Ahriman's expression showed something that might have been triumph. Then you admit, I admit that the Imperium made terrible choices in the aftermath of the Heresy. That we took gene seed from traitor legions and used it to create new chapters without telling them the truth. That we've maintained that deception for 10,000 years. That you, Captain Angelos, and every blood raven who's ever lived, you've been lied to about your origins. Valores turned fully to face the blood ravens. But I also admit this. You are some of the most effective anti-chaos warriors in the Imperium. Your librarians have stopped more demonic incursions than entire sectors of conventional forces. Your knowledge-seeking, Your obsession with understanding the enemy, it comes from Magnus's genius. But you've directed it toward protection instead of pride, toward defense instead of damnation. You are what the 1,000 Sons could have been. He pointed at Ahriman. He says heritage matters, that you're his brothers, and genetically, he's right. But he left out one critical detail. You've had 10,000 years to become what he is. Every battle against chaos was an opportunity to fall. Every encounter with forbidden knowledge was a chance to embrace it. Every moment of doubt was an opening for corruption. And you didn't fall. You stayed loyal. Not because you didn't know the temptation, but because you chose, again and again, not to give in. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the 1,000 Sons stood motionless, listening. So here's the truth, Valoris continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. The complete, unedited truth. You are descended from traitor gene seed. The Imperium used you without your knowledge. We've lied to you for your entire existence. And if you choose to leave, to join Ahriman's warband, to explore what Magnus's legacy truly means, no one here will stop you. The Custodes won't draw weapons. The Inquisition won't declare you excommunicate. You'll walk out of here, and history will record that the Blood Ravens made their choice with full knowledge of what they were. Angelos's voice was barely a whisper. You'd let us go? Just like that? Because if we don't, the Inquisitor said, then everything we represent is worthless. If we force you to stay through ignorance or threat, then we're proving Ahriman right, proving that we see you as weapons, not warriors. As tools, not sons. The Imperium has made enough mistakes with your bloodline. We won't compound them by denying you agency. Ahriman moved forward, his staff striking the stone floor with a sound like thunder. You hear that, brothers? They admit their crimes. They admit they've used you. Now come with us. Learn what Magnus truly offered. Knowledge without restriction. Power without apology. We can teach you things the Imperium has hidden for 10 millennia. You can offer damnation wrapped in pretty words. Angelos's voice was stronger now. Clearer. Just like you offered our Gene Father. Just like you offered your entire legion. He turned to his warriors. Brothers, I won't make this choice for you. The Captain General is right. This has to be our decision, each of us, individually. So I'm asking you now, who are we? A librarian stepped forward. Brother Jonah Orion, his psychic hood crackling with barely controlled power. I feel it. The connection to Magnus, the genetic memory, it's real. It's always been real. Every time I've channeled the warp, every time I've touched the Imperium, I've felt his presence in my blood. I thought I was imagining it. I thought it was chaos trying to corrupt me. But it wasn't. It was my father's legacy. He raised his force staff. And I reject it. Not because it's false, but because I've seen what it becomes. I've fought corrupted sorcerers on 100 worlds. I've seen what knowledge without restriction really means. It means losing yourself to the very powers you claim to master. Magnus chose pride. We choose duty. Magnus chose power. We choose purpose. We are not his sons because we carry his genes. We are blood ravens because we chose to be. Another voice. Another brother stepping forward. Then another. One by one, the blood ravens declared themselves. Not through denial of their heritage, but through acceptance of what they'd become despite it. They owned their genetic legacy, acknowledged Magnus's influence in their capabilities and their obsessions, and then chose to remain loyal to the Imperium that had lied to them. Not all of them. 3 brothers stepped away from the formation, walked toward Ahriman's forces. They didn't speak, didn't explain, just moved with the slow certainty of men who'd found something they'd been searching for their entire lives, even if that something was damnation. Valoris let them go. Angelos watched his brothers leave, and Valoris saw the pain in his face. The loss, the understanding that this moment would never fully heal, that his chapter would carry this wound forever. Then Angelos turned back to his remaining warriors. We stay, we serve, not because we're ignorant, because we choose to believe the Emperor's vision was worth fighting for, even if his empire isn't. We are blood ravens, sons of Magnus in blood, sons of the Emperor by choice. And choice is all that matters. Ahriman stood silent for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he nodded. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps choice is what matters. Magnus would have appreciated that. Before ... Before everything went wrong. He turned to leave, his warriors following. The 3 blood ravens who joined him walked at his side, their former brothers watching them go with expressions of grief and understanding. At the chamber entrance, Ahriman paused. Gabriel Angelos, when you face the next Thousand Suns warband, when you fight and kill corrupted sorcerers who carry the same gene markers you do, remember, they also chose. Some choices lead to damnation. Some lead to duty. Neither is wrong. Both are just ... choices. Then he was gone, fading into the shadows with the practiced ease of a legion that had learned to exist between reality and nightmare. The blood ravens stood in formation. 70 warriors minus 3. Changed forever, knowing their truth, carrying that weight, and choosing to keep fighting anyway. The journey back to the Blood Ravens battle barge was silent. 70 warriors who'd left as one thing and returned as something else entirely. Same armor, same weapons, same oaths carved into their bones through hypno-conditioning and centuries of service. But the weight they carried now was different, heavier, more honest. Valores watched them from the observation deck of his strike cruiser as their vessel broke orbit. The Inquisitor stood beside him, her death mask finally removed, revealing a face lined with age and bearing scars that spoke of battles fought in shadows, where no one would ever sing songs of glory. "They'll never be the same," she said quietly. "Even the ones who stayed loyal. Especially the ones who stayed loyal. Knowledge like that, it changes you at a fundamental level." "Good," Valores replied. "They were never meant to be the same. They were meant to choose. And they did. 3 of them chose differently. 3 of them were honest about what they wanted. That took its own kind of courage." He turned from the viewport. "The question is, what do we do now? The policy of managed ignorance is broken. If we did this for the Blood Ravens, can we justify keeping other chapters in the dark?" The Inquisitor was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent lifetimes making impossible decisions. "We give them the choice. All of them. Every chapter whose origins we've obscured. We send emissaries. We bring the truth. We let them decide what to do with it. The High Lords will never approve that. The High Lords don't have a choice anymore. The galaxy is splitting apart. Primarchs are returning. Chaos forces are more active than they've been in 10,000 years. We can't afford to keep our own warriors in the dark when the darkness itself is becoming literal. We need Space Marines who fight because they choose to, not because they don't know any better." Valores nodded slowly. "It will take years, decades maybe. And some of them will make the wrong choice. Some of them already have. The difference is now they'll be making informed decisions. And the ones who stay loyal, the ones who choose the Imperium despite knowing the truth, they'll be worth 10 chapters of warriors who serve out of ignorance." Word spread through the Imperium the way all dangerous knowledge spreads. Slowly at first, then all at once. The Inquisition sent delegations to the chapters whose origins had been deliberately obscured. Some meetings went like the Blood Ravens, tense, painful, but ultimately ending in renewed commitment. Other chapters reacted with rage, feeling betrayed by an Imperium they'd bled for across millennia. Most stayed loyal anyway. Some didn't. The Silver Skulls learned they were descended from mixed gene seed, a combination of stocks designed to enhance their prognostication abilities. They absorbed the information with the same calm acceptance they showed when reading the Emperor's tarot. Fate had made them what they were. They would continue being what fate required. The Carcharodons received their emissaries in the cold darkness between stars. The delegation never returned. But the Carcharodons continued their patrols, continued their hunts, continued serving as the Imperium's void-born predators. If they learned something about themselves that changed their perspective, they kept it hidden in the darkness where they'd always lived. Some truths don't need speaking aloud. The Minotaurs were different. When they learned the full extent of their genetic manipulation, learned they'd been purpose-built as enforcers against other space marines, crafted from gene seed selected specifically for aggression and lack of empathy toward fellow Astartes, their reaction was simple. We know what we are. We've always known. We're tools, weapons, the Imperium's hammer for when brothers need breaking. If you expected us to have an existential crisis, you don't understand us at all. They continued their work. Terra continued deploying them. Nothing changed, except now everyone was honest about it. The Red Scorpions underwent months of intensive testing after learning about their blended heritage. Their paranoia intensified. Their purity protocols became even more extreme. But they didn't break. Instead, they doubled down on their identity. If they carried Iron Warriors genetics, they'd prove through action that heritage meant nothing. That discipline and faith could overcome any genetic predisposition. That choice was stronger than blood. And the Blood Ravens themselves, they became something unexpected. They embraced their heritage fully, no longer hiding from the psychic resonance they felt with Magnus's legacy. Their librarians stopped fighting against their nature and started channeling it more effectively. They became even more dangerous to Chaos forces because now they understood themselves, understood the temptations they faced, understood the slope they were choosing not to slide down with every battle. Gabriel Angelos commissioned a new chamber in their fortress monastery. Not a shrine, not a memorial, just a room with 71 pedestals. One for every blood raven who'd stood in that catacomb on Malachor VII. 67 remained empty, representing the brothers who'd chosen to stay. 3 held names carved in simple script, marking the ones who'd left. The 71st pedestal, larger than the others, held a single inscription. We are what we choose to be. Heritage informs. Choice defines. Visitors to the chamber often asked about the 3 names. Why memorialize deserters? Why not strike them from records like most chapters would? Angelos's answer was always the same, because they were honest. In a galaxy built on lies, that's worth remembering. Time passed. Crusades were fought. Worlds burned and were reborn. The Great Rift continued tearing reality, but the Imperium endured. And the Space Marines, those transhuman warriors who stood between humanity and extinction, they fought with a new understanding of themselves. Not all mysteries were solved. Some chapters never received the truth about their origins, either because their records truly were lost, or because some conspiracies run too deep to unravel. The Lost Legions, the 2nd and the 11th, their fate remained sealed. Whatever the Emperor had done to them, whatever had been so terrible that even their memory was erased, that secret stayed buried. Some truths aren't meant for mortal knowledge, even transhuman mortals. But for the chapters that did learn, for the warriors who stood at the crossroads between comfortable lies and painful truths, something fundamental shifted. They stopped fighting out of programmed loyalty, started fighting out of chosen purpose. The difference was subtle but profound. A space marine who serves because he doesn't know any better is dangerous. A space marine who serves despite knowing the full weight of what he is, what he carries, what his genetic father became, that warrior is terrifying in his conviction. Because that's a warrior who's already faced the worst truth about himself and chosen to keep fighting anyway. In the end, the question that opened this story, the question of what happens when warriors built on lies discover the truth, it answered itself through action rather than words. Some broke, some fell. Most stayed. And the ones who stayed became stronger for it, not despite their knowledge but because of it. The Imperium is not a good empire. It's brutal, authoritarian, willing to sacrifice billions for strategic advantage. It lies to its people, manipulates its warriors, treats human life as a resource to be expended. But it's also the only thing standing between humanity and annihilation, between civilization and the howling void of chaos, between existence and extinction. And so these warriors, these space marines who learned they were forged from questionable materials by morally compromised architects, they chose to keep defending it. Not because the Imperium deserved their loyalty, but because humanity did. Because the Emperor's vision, however corrupted its execution, was still worth dying for. Because someone had to stand on the walls, and they'd been built to do exactly that. Heritage gave them strength, training gave them skill. But choice, that most human of capacities preserved even in their transhuman forms, choice gave them purpose. Somewhere in the galaxy right now, a Bloodraven's librarian stands in an archive, researching ancient texts on chaos corruption, using knowledge that came from Magnus the Red's genetic legacy to protect worlds from the very powers his gene father fell to. The irony isn't lost on him. He feels Magnus's brilliance in every thought, Magnus's curiosity in every pursuit of forbidden's lore, Magnus's dangerous certainty that knowledge is always worth the price. But he also feels something else. Something the Thousand Sons lost. Restraint, wisdom, the understanding that some knowledge comes at costs too high to pay. He is Magnus's son by blood, but he is himself by choice. In another sector, a Minotaur stands over the body of a space marine who'd turned traitor, who'd put personal glory above duty to the Imperium. The Minotaur feels nothing, no remorse, no brotherhood, just the cold satisfaction of a job completed. His genetic heritage made him this way, aggressive and detached, perfect for the terrible work of executing other Astartes. He knows this, accepts this, and chooses to point that capacity at worthy targets rather than letting it consume him. He is a weapon forged from questionable materials, but he aims himself. And across the Imperium, in 100 fortress monasteries, in 1,000 battle barges, in countless desperate last stands on dying worlds, space marines with uncertain origins fight and bleed and die for an empire that lied to them. They do it with eyes open, with full knowledge of what they are, with understanding of the genetic sins they carry. They do it anyway, because in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the only light left is the one you choose to carry yourself. Heritage might determine your capacity for darkness. Training might determine your capacity for violence. But choice, that fragile, magnificent human capacity that even genetic engineering and psycho-conditioning couldn't completely erase. Choice determines whether you're a monster or a hero. And these warriors, built from the genetic legacy of broken gods and fallen angels, they choose every day to be heroes. Not perfect, not pure, not innocent, but trying, in their own brutal way, to be better than the blood that runs through their veins says they should be. That's the real answer to the mystery of the unknown origins. Not where these chapters came from, but what they became despite it. Not the sins of their fathers, but the choices of the sons. In the darkness, they chose light. In despair, they chose duty. In revelation, they chose loyalty. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the Emperor intended all along. Not perfect warriors incapable of falling, but imperfect warriors who fall and choose to rise again, who face their darkest truths and decide those truths don't define them, who understand that destiny is written in genes, but choice is written in action. The Bloodraven's motto used to be, "Knowledge is power, guard it well." After Malachor VII, they added a second line, "But choice is stronger than any knowledge." Guard that better. Perhaps that's the lesson all Space Marines should learn. Perhaps that's the truth that should be written above every fortress monastery door, carved into every suit of power armor, whispered in every hypno-conditioning session. You are what your gene seed makes you, but you become what you choose to be. And in a galaxy where gods and demons wage eternal war for the souls of mortals, where truth is fluid and loyalty is currency and hope is the rarest resource of all, that choice, that tiny spark of human agency preserved in transhuman frames, might be the only thing that actually matters. The warriors with unknown origins aren't cursed. They're blessed. Because every day they wake up, they have to choose who they are. And every day, most of them choose to be heroes. That's not heresy. That's not weakness. That's the most human thing left in the galaxy. And it might just be enough to save it.